On the evening of September 14, 2015, at approximately 9:20 p.m., 19-year-old Jaden Holloway was driving home from his job at a fast food restaurant in Rockford, Illinois. On his way home, he was stopped by a patrol unit near the intersection of Auburn Street and Central Avenue. The initial stop was recorded in the patrol log as a routine check of driver identification and registration. According to the official report, the officers requested his license and asked him to step out of the vehicle. The report stated that Jaden resisted arrest. Later interviews with two bystanders contradicted this note. Both witnesses said the young man only asked, "Why am I being detained?" before being restrained. At 9:34 p.m., he was handcuffed and placed in the back of the patrol car. He was transported to the Rockford Police Department's District 3 station. The booking sheet lists his arrival at 9:47 p.m. The charge section remained blank, with only the word "processing" noted. At 10:15 p.m., Jaden's parents, Marcos and Linda Holloway, received a call from the station. An officer told them their son had been taken in for a formal procedure and would likely be released the following morning. The family did not receive further explanation. Believing the detention was temporary, they stayed at home. At 1:58 a.m. on September 15th, 4 hours after the detention, the Holloways received another call. This time, an officer informed them their son had been found dead in his cell. The explanation given was injuries sustained in a fight with another detainee. No additional details were provided. The family arrived at the Winnebago County morgue later that morning. There, they were shown Jaden's body. His mother later stated she could hardly recognize him. Visible injuries included deep bruising across his face, swelling around both eyes, and abrasions around his wrists consistent with prolonged handcuffing. Long linear welts ran across his back. The official police report, completed on September 16th, described the cause of death as blunt force trauma sustained during altercation with cellmate. The report made no mention of restraints, use of force by staff, or injuries inconsistent with a single altercation. Unsatisfied with the explanation, the family requested an independent autopsy. Dr. William Krause, a licensed forensic pathologist from Chicago, examined the body on September 18th. His findings contradicted the official record. Dr. Krause documented the following: multiple rib fractures on both sides of the chest, with at least 6 showing signs of recent trauma, a traumatic brain injury caused by repeated blows to the head, internal hemorrhages in the abdominal cavity. Dr. Krause's written conclusions stated that the injuries could not reasonably be explained by a single fight with another detainee. The pattern indicated repeated strikes with a hard instrument and prolonged restraint. When the Holloways retrieved Jaden's belongings from the station on September 20th, they were handed a plastic evidence bag containing his wallet, clothing, and apartment keys. His phone, a common smartphone model he carried daily, was missing. When the family asked about it, they were told there was no phone logged at intake. However, records from his mobile provider showed that his phone had remained active until 10:02 p.m. on the night of his detention, approximately 15 minutes after he arrived at the station. After that time, all activity ceased. The absence of the phone raised additional questions. Friends later confirmed that Jaden routinely used his phone to record interactions when he felt unsafe, including past encounters with security guards and minor disputes. He had not reported serious problems with law enforcement prior to this incident, but he was described by peers as cautious and attentive to documenting confrontations. At the conclusion of September 2015, the official narrative remained unchanged. Jaden Holloway had died as the result of a fight with a cellmate. The police report listed no evidence contradicting this claim, and no officer admitted to witnessing the incident. The family, however, had seen injuries not reflected in the official paperwork. They also noted the disappearance of a key personal item. On September 16, 2015, one day after Jaden Holloway's death, a regional newspaper published an article under the headline, "Teen Suspect Dies in Jail Fight." The piece described him as an aggressive youth with alleged gang affiliations. No supporting records were cited. Instead, the article presented photographs taken from Jaden's social media accounts, showing him standing with friends in his neighborhood. These images were framed as indicative of criminal association. The Holloway family immediately disputed these claims. Jayden had no prior criminal record beyond a single citation for a traffic violation. He worked part-time at a fast food chain, attended college, and lived with his parents and younger sister. According to school records, he had no disciplinary history at Rock Valley College. The family interpreted the coverage as an attempt to undermine his character and diminish public concern about the circumstances of his death. On September 18th, Marcos Holloway, Jayden's father, began formally requesting information about the events of his son's detention. He filed written requests for the incident report, the booking log, and any available camera footage from the District 3 station. His requests were acknowledged, but not answered. Later that week, he received a written response from the department claiming that the station's surveillance system was not operational during the time in question. Around the same time, the family began noticing increased police presence near their residence. A marked patrol car appeared frequently parked on the street outside their apartment building, often during the evening and night hours. No explanation was provided. When Marcos approached an officer about the vehicle, the officer gave no answer and drove away. From late September into early October, the Holloways reported a series of anonymous phone calls. The calls usually occurred between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. The caller never identified themselves. In some instances, the voice warned the family to stop causing trouble. On other occasions, the caller remained silent before hanging up. Phone company records later confirmed the calls originated from prepaid numbers with no registered owner. On October 6, 2015, at approximately 9:40 p.m., several rocks were thrown at the windows of the Holloway residence. The incident was reported to the police, but no suspects were identified, and no follow-up occurred. The family paid for repairs themselves. Afterward, several neighbors began limiting contact. Longtime acquaintances avoided conversations, and some declined to be seen entering or leaving the Holloway's apartment. According to Linda Holloway, this shift in behavior suggested pressure had extended beyond the immediate family. Meanwhile, questions remained about the only other individual reportedly present in Jayden's cell. Official records identified him as 27-year-old Leon Porter, arrested that same evening for a probation violation. On October 9th, Marcos's attorney attempted to file a request to speak with Porter. Days later, Porter was transferred to a correctional facility in another state, under the explanation of security reasons. After the transfer, all attempts at contact failed. No interview was ever conducted, and no statement from Porter was included in the official case file. Marcos persisted with his inquiries. On October 14th, he delivered a formal complaint to the Winnebago County State's attorney, citing contradictions between the independent autopsy and the official report. He also highlighted the missing phone and absence of camera footage. The office responded that the complaint would be reviewed in due course, but no immediate action followed. During this period, Marcos encountered a former acquaintance in law enforcement, Officer Daniel Pierce, who had once worked with Marcos in a neighborhood watch program, approached him in the parking lot of a hardware store. According to Marcos's later account, Pierce spoke in a low voice and warned, "If you want to keep your daughter alive, stop this." No further explanation was provided. Marcos interpreted the statement as a direct threat against his 16-year-old daughter, Alana. Jayden Holloway's funeral took place on September 22, 2015, at a small church in Rockford. After the service, his family returned to their apartment with the limited personal effects that had been released. Among them were his clothing, wallet, and keys. His phone, however, was not included. When Marcos Holloway raised the issue formally on September 25th, he received a written response from the police department stating, "No phone was ever confiscated during intake." Marcos considered this explanation inconsistent with his knowledge of his son's habits. Jayden carried his phone daily, and friends confirmed he rarely left it behind. Marcos obtained records from the mobile carrier showing activity until 10:02 p.m. on the night of September 14th, when Jayden was already inside the District 3 station. After that, the phone went silent. The discrepancy between the carrier's data and the official statement suggested that the phone had been in use inside the station, but never entered into evidence. Through his attorney, Marcos sought further clarification. In early October, he was contacted by a county administrative employee who, under condition of confidentiality, indicated that there had been prior tensions between Jayden and certain officers. The employee did not provide names, but suggested that he might have had something they didn't want seen. Over the following weeks, Marcos heard repeated references from acquaintances connected to local law enforcement. Several hinted that Jayden had been recording something on his device before his arrest. No details were provided, but the consistency of these remarks suggested a shared rumor within the department. On October 29, 2015, Marcos arranged a meeting with a former officer, 41-year-old Michael Darden, who had been dismissed from the Rockford Police Department the previous year for misconduct related to evidence handling. The meeting took place in a neutral location, arranged through Marcos's lawyer. Darden confirmed the rumors directly. According to him, Jayden had recorded a video on his phone inside the station yard earlier that summer. The video allegedly showed multiple officers striking a handcuffed detainee and threatening him with a firearm. Darden stated that the video circulated briefly among younger officers before superiors ordered its deletion. Darden further alleged that Jayden's phone was targeted because it contained the original recording. He claimed the device was seized the night Jayden was detained and never entered into official evidence because the content posed a liability for the department. Following this disclosure, Marcos reviewed the sequence of events from the perspective of potential concealment. His son had been stopped without clear cause, detained without charges, declared dead within hours, and returned without his primary electronic device. The official report listed only injuries consistent with a fight, while an independent autopsy documented extensive trauma. The station's cameras were declared not operational, and the only cellmate was moved to another state. The missing phone, according to Darden, may have contained video evidence of officer misconduct. Marcos relayed this information to his attorney, who attempted to file a new complaint with the state's attorney's office. The complaint highlighted the possibility that Jayden's death was linked to evidence he possessed. No action followed. The office declined to confirm whether the matter would be investigated further. In December 2015, the family received an anonymous threat that shifted the situation decisively. A photograph of his 16-year-old daughter, Alana, was left in the family mailbox. On the back were handwritten words, "You're next." The following sequence of events occurred between February and May of 2016. Each incident targeted individuals connected to the circumstances of Jayden Holloway's detention. On February 12, 2016, Officer Stephen Carter, age 37, was found deceased in his garage. Carter had been assigned responsibility for overseeing the surveillance system at District 3 during the night of September 14, 2015. According to the original internal memorandum, he reported the system as not functioning. On the night of his death, neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. His wife discovered him the next morning tied to a chair. A note was located on the floor. The text read, "The cameras weren't broken." No valuables were missing from the residence. An entry appeared forced but selective. 1 week later, on February 19, 2016, Sergeant James Miller, age 42, was shot outside his residence in a suburban neighborhood of Rockford. Witnesses reported hearing 3 consecutive gunshots at approximately 10:45 p.m. When officers arrived, Miller was found with 3 close-range bullet wounds to the chest. No firearm was recovered at the scene. No suspects were immediately identified, and there were no security recordings from surrounding homes. Miller had been named in internal rumors as one of the officers physically involved in Jayden Holloway's detention. The third incident occurred on March 7, 2016. Officer Robert Hansen, 34, who authored the original incident report attributing Jayden's death to a cell fight, died when his vehicle exploded while he was driving to his morning shift. The official press release described the event as a probable mechanical failure. However, investigators later confirmed traces of an improvised explosive device attached beneath the driver's seat. Hansen had also been identified by Marcos's attorney as the officer who introduced a knife into evidence during the early phase of the case, an action disputed by the family. The fourth case followed on May 3, 2016. Lieutenant Thomas Bryant, 45, shift supervisor at District 3 on the night of Jayden's arrest, was reported missing after failing to appear for duty. 3 days later, his body was recovered from the Rock River. His wrists were secured with handcuffs, and his torso displayed multiple contusions consistent with blunt force trauma. The coroner listed cause of death as drowning, with contributory injuries from assault. On January 17, 2017, nearly a year after the last in the series of officer deaths, Marcos Holloway was arrested in Rockford, Illinois. According to the arrest report, he was stopped by a state police unit while driving a rented vehicle on a rural road outside the city. Inside the car, investigators documented the presence of 2 firearms, ammunition, and materials later described as components suitable for improvised explosives. Marcos was taken into custody without incident. From the beginning, prosecutors framed the case as a sequence of targeted retaliatory killings carried out by a grieving father. The indictment listed 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted use of explosives, and multiple counts of weapons possession. The timeline established by the prosecution connected each officer's death with Marcos's movements, citing witness sightings, partial forensic evidence, and the discovery of items in his car at the time of arrest. The trial opened in September 2017 at the Winnebago County Courthouse. Despite the original catalyst being the death of Jaden Holloway in custody, the proceedings focused almost exclusively on the subsequent homicides. Each time the defense attempted to introduce discussion of Jaden's case, the presiding judge sustained objections from the prosecution. The independent autopsy conducted by Dr. William Krause was ruled inadmissible on procedural grounds, with the court accepting only the official coroner's report as valid evidence. Defense motions to suppress certain pieces of evidence seized from Marcos's vehicle were denied. Requests for continuances to allow further discovery were also rejected. The cumulative effect was that the circumstances of Jaden's death, and the disputed evidence surrounding it, were excluded from the trial record. The courtroom narrative became centered on Marcos as the sole actor of a violent campaign, independent of any provocation or institutional misconduct. In closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized a narrative of deliberate revenge. They presented Marcos as having created a list of officers connected to his son's detention and executing them one by one. They highlighted the note found near Officer Carter's body, the precision of the shooting that killed Sergeant Miller, the engineering of the device that destroyed Hanson's car, and the methodical disposal of Lieutenant Bryant. According to the prosecution, the pattern demonstrated premeditation and intent beyond doubt. On October 23, 2017, after deliberating for less than 2 days, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict on all major counts. Marcos Holloway was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentencing order emphasized the gravity of the crimes and described the killings as a calculated campaign of vigilante justice carried out outside the law. The son was dead, the father condemned to life imprisonment, and the chain of responsibility within the department remained intact.